And so I decided to found CreatureKind, which is just a year old, with the aims of engaging Christians in the UK and in North America with animals as a faith-based concern, with a particular focus on farmed animal welfare. Farmed animal welfare, as you are aware, far outweighs numerically all the other uses that human beings make of animals, and so that's why we've identified it as the most urgent area of action. And we've been working over the last year to engage with churches and other non-governmental organisations in the area to get them thinking well about farmed animal welfare in a Christian context. We've got three key aims. We want individuals, churches and organisations to commit to reducing their overall consumption of animal products, to move progressively to sourcing remaining animal products from higher welfare sources, and to be engaging their constituencies with that project as they go. And what's really exciting today for CreatureKind is that we are enrolling our first CreatureKind institution. We're absolutely delighted that the University of Winchester understands the relationship between its church foundation and concern for animals, and is willing to partner with us, starting today, on a commitment to, as an institution, work on a cycle of reviewing its practice, reducing consumption of animal products, and moving to increasingly sourcing its animal products from higher welfare sources. Now, we're well aware that the University of Winchester, long before CreatureKind was a dream of mine, was thinking well about this issue, and it already has a whole string of awards for its positive action in relation to the ethical sourcing of animal products. But we're really excited about this new step, which will be further incremental change, which will have the potential to impact on saving many, many thousands of animals from the cruelties of intensive farming, and we hope will be play a leadership role among other institutions who will follow suit and also be signing up to this commitment with even a much greater impact. So it's a really happy day for CreatureKind. I'm really glad to be here, and I'm absolutely delighted that the University of Winchester is ready to make this commitment.
Thank you, David. So I'm Liz Stewart, I'm the first Deputy Vice-Chancellor, and it's such a joy for me to be here today to sign this agreement on behalf of the Vice-Chancellor, who's so sorry she can't be here. Our Vice-Chancellor is passionate about animal welfare, and so am I. So I'm really glad to be here today, and I'm also a theologian, so doubly glad to be here today. As David said, the University of Winchester is a Christian foundation. It was established in 1840 by the Church of England, and as a Christian foundation we seek to recognise animals as our brothers and sisters. We're also a values-driven institution, and one of our values is compassion, and we seek to recognise the kinship between all life and to nurture compassion for people, for animals and for the planet. So it gives me enormous joy on behalf of the institution to make these commitments that David has outlined and to sign us up to be a CreatureKind university.
There's a widely accepted narrative that states that the Christian tradition has been inattentive to the welfare of animals. We can find representative statements of that in the 19th century German philosopher Ludwig Feuerbach, who said nature has no interest for Christians, and more recently in Lynn White's often repeated judgment that Christianity is the most anthropocentric of all the world religions, and Peter Singer's identification of Christianity as the foremost advocate of an ideology justifying the exploitation of other animals. I believe that this narrative is badly wrong and strongly in need of refutation. primarily because Christians need to understand the faith-based roots of concern for animals deep within their own tradition so that they can be part, with others, of leading a movement for advancing concern for animals in relation to the key challenges that face us. Graham said earlier that he was a religious studies scholar only interested in what people do rather than what they should do. My scholarship is in theological ethics, which is I'm absolutely interested in what people should do on the basis of their Christian commitments. So that's my project. I can't provide a full refutation in the time available to the charge that Christianity has been unfriendly towards animals. But as a gesture in that direction, let's note that Christianity inherited from Judaism, or we might say from earlier forms of Judaism, the profound recognition of creation created good by a good God, and of other animal creatures as fellow recipients of God's grace. Jesus taught his disciples to look at the birds of the air and lilies of the field as models for their discipleship. And the first New Testament Christologies in Ephesians and Colossians picture Christ as a figure effecting the redemption not only of human beings, but of all things in heaven and earth, nothing short of cosmic in its scale. Vegetarianism was an issue debated by Christians in the New Testament period, with early traditions identifying the Apostle James and even Jesus as vegetarian. Early Christian theologians defended the goodness of creation against Gnostic opponents. Christian monastic communities mostly avoided the consumption of meat. And hagiographical traditions in relation to the Christian saints identified profound concern for animals and harmony with them as characteristic of what it meant to be possessed of Christian saintly holiness, as recalled recently in Pope Francis's encyclical Laudato Si. Recently I came across an early 15th century English commentary on the Ten Commandments called Dives and Pauper, which states that God prohibits cruelty towards animals, quote, "For God that made all has care of all, and he shall take vengeance on all that misuse his creatures." In the 16th century, the great reformer John Calvin commented on the laws against animal cruelty in Deuteronomy and noted that God will condemn us as cruel and unkind folk if we pity not the brute beast. Christians believed that it was legitimate to make use of other animals for necessities, but that unnecessary cruelty was forbidden on the grounds that animals were, like us, creatures of God. It should be no surprise to us, therefore, that both Roman Catholic and evangelical Christians in Britain and Ireland in the 18th and 19th centuries, alongside prominent Jews, recognized the new cruelties towards animals in those periods in the early industrial age as a faith-based concern, and that those Christians were instrumental in the first anti-cruelty legislation in the early 19th century and the founding of the RSPCA, nor that Christians were the leading voices in the anti-vivisection cause at the end of the 19th century, arguing against the secular scientific establishment who wanted to be able to experiment on animals without restraint. For some reason, many Christians seem to have forgotten these faith-based reasons for being concerned for animals and the legacy of Christian opposition towards cruelty to animals. My own academic work in this area has attempted to delineate the theological foundations for thinking well about other animals and the ethical responsibilities that follow from this theological perspective. I go out talking widely to Christians about these issues, both within and outside the academy. I find it really striking that I've not met with any objection to the position that I have advanced that Christians have serious faith-based reasons for being concerned about and promoting the flourishing of fellow animal creatures of God. In the context of our current practice towards other animals, this modest position that Christians have reasons for being concerned about animals implies really radical changes in practice. We've already heard from Joyce earlier about the many cruelties of intensive factory farming of animals. In contrast to that early 15th century statement I just quoted, that Christians have a responsibility not to abuse God's creatures, it's very, very clear that our current practices of intensive farming are doing precisely that, and therefore there's a very straightforward argument that Christians in particular have faith-based reasons for thinking again about their participation in these structures of intensive animal production. So the reason I founded CreatureKind was that I wanted to take that argument out to the churches. And as I said, we've been working for a year now engaging churches with the project of thinking about animals as a faith-based concern. I've been very enthusiastic about the responses that we've had, and I'm very optimistic that Christian institutions like Winchester, or Christian institutions with a Christian foundation like Winchester, will recognise very readily that concern for animals has practical implications in the context of their foundational commitments that mean they need to think very differently. Because virtually all the animal products that we consume currently come from those intensive sites of animal production, as I say, that means radical change. And so we're very hopeful that other institutions and Christian churches will follow Winchester's example of committing to a process of review and rethinking in order to shift patterns of consumption to avoid complicity with these intensive schemes of animal production. Of course, you don't need to be a Christian to recognise the appalling wrongdoing that we're currently complicit in the way we're supporting intensive modes of animal agriculture. But what I'm hoping to do in my academic work and through CreatureKind is engage Christians and help them to realise that they have particular faith-based reasons for acting in this area, and that therefore they need to take practical cognizance of that in the way that they address their consumption of animal products. So I'm really looking forward to working with the University of Winchester in this process, and I'm hopeful that we will soon be working with a number of other institutions too. And if you're from an institution that's not Winchester and are interested in how CreatureKind could work in your institution, please be in touch with us. You can find us online at becreaturekind.org, and we'll be very happy to be in conversation with you.